Sonic Frontiers has only been out for a few months, but the improvement in the speedrun has been staggering. From near daily routing updates and several new discoveries when it comes to skips and tech, 3 runners have stood out among the rest in the early days of Frontiers speedrunning. Together, these runners would push the record lower and lower. The community started to wonder if the world record could push past the last hour barrier. I'm DawnSR, and this is Speedrun Evolution, the quest for sub-hour. In the early days of Frontier speedrunning, the game would change a lot. Cyberspace stages were optimized incredibly before the game was even released by the tech known in the speedrunning community as the Gritty. This was done by using a homing attack and cancelling out of it with a boost, extending the faster speed of the homing attack in whatever direction you aimed. Since it was an open world game, the biggest finds in the open world would generally come from routing, but even primitive routes were yet to be formed. However, early on there were some big discoveries that would shape the speedrun permanently. The first being the discovery of the Hedgehog Space Program, otherwise known as the HSP, and this was found by DSS. This allowed runners to skip the entirety of Kronos and Ares Island by getting into the boss arena early. Well, in Ares it's actually a bit easier than that. This let early runners mostly avoid the routing process on the first 2 islands and focus on Chaos and Uranus. If you haven't played Sonic Frontiers, I'll break down what the normal gameplay loop of the islands look like. There are essentially 2 conditions that need to be met to finish the island. Collect memory tokens to talk to your friend on the island in many different locations. This part is usually tied to story progression and exposition. You also need to collect vault keys to unlock the Chaos Emeralds all over the islands. These are obtained in cyberspace, and these dig spots, which can also hold 8 memory tokens each and portal gears used to enter cyberspace. Even before a route was figured out, speedrunners knew that fishing was OP. By the time you got to the last island, the values are inflated so much that it's actually faster to fish to get keys and tokens than getting them all through normal gameplay. You would see runners route in certain amounts of purple coins per big to account for this. For the first week or so, most people just ran around building a better idea of the map and what things would be important in moving forward. It was clear though that a definitive route would save massive amounts of time. A few members of the community came up with the first real route, and it would be a great start for the category. Master Roxas would use this route to push the record under 2 hours with the 1:54:37. This route chose the shortest stages to complete, routed out the dig spots for keys, gears, and memory tokens needed. They accounted for the number of them you would need by the time you reached each area. This would massively accelerate the run to have such a solid route figured out within a week of the release. In the coming days, many runners like Roxas, Grimmy Hunter, and Emerald would lower the record using this route. But then, one of our big contenders would arrive. The first dominant runner in Sonic Frontiers came from an unexpected place. As a new Sonic game releases, usually a ton of runners from different corners of the Sonic speedrunning community will come together, and it's interesting to see who will land on top when the dust settles. But this runner didn't come from the Sonic community. This is Onaku. Most recently, Onaku had run The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD. Onaku was mostly known in the Zelda community, so this was an unexpected twist. Since he was clearly a very talented gamer, it wouldn't be much of a surprise that he would be a top contender. Although it was a bit out of left field, as Onaku wasn't even much of a Sonic fan. In fact, he had never even played a Sonic game before Frontiers. The only reason that Onaku even got into Frontiers in the first place is that his girlfriend won the game in a giveaway. Shout out to Vive. Onaku had been running Frontiers since very early on, even getting a record in the Wild West route days. But by the time the 2-week leaderboard embargo was about to end, Onaku had taken over. There were a ton of names in those early days, Grimmy, Roxas, Emerald, but from this point on, it was the Onaku show. After weeks of a little opposition, Onaku would finally have a record taken from him, a 1:22:35 done by Orion YTP. Orion would implement some new stuff into the run, like a more consistent side loop setup for the night fight, and overall just had some very solid and consistent gameplay. This was Onaku's first real challenge, and he would respond quickly. The very next day, Onaku would take it back, lowering the record to a low 1:22. Onaku was looking to solidify himself as Sonic Frontier's top runner, with few able to keep up. That's how most of the community felt at the time anyway. Well, scratch that. While Onaku had been the leader to this point, a new challenger was approaching, KD4, the GOAT of Sonic speedrunning. Her start in Sonic Adventure DX was an omen of what she would do to many other Sonic games. Her first world record was one to end an extremely dominant streak in the game's main category, Sonic Story. Ever since, Katie has been known as the GOAT of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, absolutely dominating the game's boards with one of the only board sweeps in the game's history. Currently, Katie's record in Hero Story stands over a minute ahead of the rest, the best run in the history of the game. The adventure games were by quite a wide margin the most popular and competitive Sonic speedruns prior to Frontiers, making the feat even more impressive. Originally, she wasn't sure she would speedrun Frontiers, but after seeing others run the game, she decided to give it a shot and got to practicing. Katie would enter with an incredible time. In her first session of runs, she would already be within a minute of the record. And in her second session of attempts, KD4 would This began the rivalry between Katie and Onaku. They would strike back and forth, pushing each other to lower the record farther and farther every time. Katie's first record would be the first record to implement Shield Escape Skip, and after this, every other runner would have to follow suit. It had been around for quite a while, but no other runner was willing to push what at the time seemed unthinkable to implement in single segment. Katie was not afraid to push the limits of the speedrun. Just like you shouldn't be afraid to subscribe to the channel. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Thanks. Competition was pushing these two runners to improve at a rate that was staggering. Runners who had been able to keep up to this point started to fall behind for the first time. Katie and Onaku together would drive the state of any percent to near unreachable levels for most runners. In late November, A Sinister Taka would find one of the biggest skips in Frontiers, known as the Joshua method. This skip was essentially a tutorial skip, using invisible collision to skip the end of the tutorial. This skip saved minutes, as you were skipping an entire stage, mini-boss fight, and unskippable cutscenes. Onaku would be the first to use this and got a 1:16:09, and once again, the same night, Katie would get a 1:14:27. This game of back and forth would continue for weeks on end. There would be quite a few records in this time that were relatively small when looking at the records before. After this though, Katie would bust this wide open, lowering the record by almost 2 full minutes to a 1:11:56. During this era, cutscene skips were implemented during the Shield Escape sequence by dying on the same frame the cutscene started. The rapid discoveries alongside improving gameplay made for a constant flow of world records. The any percent time would continue to be whittled down until the time hit 1:10:58 by Onaku. While Onaku had been the first to implement many of the strats until now, Katie would start to take over. On December 15th, Katie would finally implement one of the new routes that had been in the making for weeks. This is Hit and Run. You see, Hit and Run had been around for quite a while. Crody actually found this strat in the first week the game was out. There were just so many restrictions and unknowns at the time that it wasn't considered to be viable. To use Hit and Run, you would need to unlock Spin Slash, requiring nearly 100 skill points. So runners were sort of waiting for a skill route to be sorted out, since the game was still so new, and everyone was getting acquainted with the island still. Hit and Run could only really be performed on certain enemy types as well, like this Spinny Boy. This limited where Hit and Run could even be usable, basically restricting it to Chaos and Rhea Island only. However, it saved so much time, the restrictions would be worth the effort. Katie would take a few days to fully learn the new route Program Fairy and Gordon Ramsay had been developing. This would route in 3-2, replacing 3-4 in Chaos Island, as it was really convenient with hit and run, and the stage itself was much faster. The route would also change the order of events in Chaos Island by quite a bit, as you wouldn't be restricted to the ground any longer. Alongside the changes in the Chaos Island route, hit and run would also break Rhea Island wide open. Rhea Island is special. The only objective here is to shut down 6 towers, which are essentially just big platforming gauntlets. Runners previously would use HSP and creative movement to get to the top, but hit and run would completely redefine the island in the speedrun. The new route was doing the towers completely out of order to allow for more reaction time. This saved minutes on Rhea alone, dropping the time spent on the island under 3 minutes if done optimally. Katie's first record with hit and run wouldn't save much time over the old record, dropping the time only about 13 seconds. Katie would do runs over the coming days to drop the record to a 1:09:01, the longest standing record so far in any percent, lasting for almost 2 weeks. While Katie had been working on hit and run though, there was someone else catching up in the background. SilentMotorBoat to this point hadn't yet earned any Frontiers World Records, but that would change very soon. He was always a top runner in any game that he chose to run. Take Sonic Adventure 2 for example, where his peak was 4th place. Another one was Minecraft, where he'd been consistently ranked as a top runner in one of the most popular and competitive speed games out there. SMB is a runner that no one should take lightly, and he was about to prove it. On December 29th, SMB would snag his first world record in Frontiers any percent, with a 1:07:40. One thing that was interesting about SMB's run was that it was actually using strats not used in the world record for quite a while. Instead of learning hit and run and implementing the route, SMB actually just refined what was there already. This approach proved to work well because while everyone else was learning, he was catching up and even surpassing. While Katie would take the record back a few days later, from here on, SMB would continue being a record contender, only being at most about a minute behind the record from here on out. And moving forward, we would find out that SMB's strategy of not learning hit and run would pay off greatly. Enter Slingshot. While not as powerful as hit and run, it was limitless in potential. Konbu had been experimenting with using tech in the game, but using them in different ways, and that's exactly what made Slingshot work. Slingshot is essentially just an HSP, but you use Psyloop or Gritty to keep out the lock-on for longer than intended. When Sonic stomps the enemy, he now has a tremendous amount of horizontal speed as well as vertical. Basically, the farther you pull the sling back, the faster the shot will go. Slingshot was a lot easier to implement than HSP, as the prior bad frames that HSP had were now useful in flying across the ground lower. The frame perfect version still existed though, which combined the horizontal speed of the bad frame and the vertical height of an HSP. In theory, this was incredibly useful as frame perfects could match hit and run on Rhea, and the massive frame window of the late frame was just about as useful everywhere else. At first, Katie was still using hit and run as Slingshot was nearly limitless and needed time to be routed out. She would begin to use Slingshot to greater and greater effect as time passed, eventually phasing out hit and run completely. Katie would take the record back and lower it to a 1:04:21 in the coming days. Onaku would be the first to use the new route to get the best time I've ever seen in speedrunning history, a 1:04:20:69. The auto splitter originally put it at 0.67, but was later retimed to the frame. Nice. Onaku would be the first to implement a slingshot-only route into the record, eliminating the crazy amount of skill points you needed to route in, and getting rid of the inconsistency hit and run introduced, made any percent quite a bit faster and for the time being more consistent. All 3 runners would start on the grind, using Slingshot and the new optimizations and tweaks to the route day by day. Katie would take the record back with a 1:03:37, then SMB with a 1:03:35. The competition seemed fiercer than ever, and the community began to wonder if Slingshot's discovery would push us all the way to sub-hour alone. With the potential of sub-hour right around the corner, the top runners would be even more motivated than ever before. There would be massive sweeping changes in the routes of Chaos and Ouranos because of Slingshot in the coming days. Program Fairy and Onaku would be the leaders in theorizing these changes, and Onaku would be streaming almost daily to solve the routes and grind attempts. One of the first changes to the route was fishing less and using Slingshot to collect more memory tokens quicker. Another was routing in a quick cyberspace stage that was just too far out of the way on the map before, Most of the sweeping changes would happen in Arenas, but there were some changes in Chaos as well. Normally, the game expects you to get the blue emerald first, and then the shield escape sequence happens near it. Well, if you grab another emerald to start the sequence, then use shield escape skip, you can actually collect the emerald during the escape. After all of the changes and time save found, the sub-hour was inevitable. But who would do it? SMB would start to take more of a backseat, satisfied with the times he had, but Onaku and Katie wanted nothing more than to be the first to achieve it. On the 14th of January, Katie would be on a run that seemed like it could be the sub-hour. She was incredibly deep into the run, and her best possible time still read as though it was possible. Usually comparing to best segments is pretty unrealistic, but these were newer golds since the route was ever changing. There was a world where Katie could do it on this run. The run was good even for Katie's standards, to the point where it was feeling more real than ever before. However, it wouldn't be this run. Katie would eventually end with a 1 hour and 40-second time. While the ending was solid, it wasn't god tier like Katie would have needed, but 40 seconds was all that stood between Katie and history. Katie's runs were solid, but no more than any day. Her 1 hour and 40-second time was such an incredible run that it was hard to imagine she could top it. Her runs would be consistently behind in the early game because of how good her last PB was, but that wouldn't stop her. She wanted the sub 1, and this run was no different. Anyone watching this run live wouldn't think anything special of the run, as she was anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds behind pretty much the entire time. The run was solid, but no one expected what came next. The run just kept chugging along until she entered the final island 20 seconds behind. If you remember the last time Katie was here, a sub-hour was possible with an incredible ending. She had another chance.
I think it's it. I think it's it, dude. By like a second, maybe. I need your help. Jesse, we gotta get the sub-hour, Jesse! There we go. Hell yeah! Oh, man. That Arenos came in clutch. It's all Onaku's and Program Fairy's work, though. TY. But that's the sub-hour. I was kind of nervous that I wasn't going to get it first. All right. But it's here. I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Katie had finally done it. After weeks of grind, the last hour barrier in Sonic Frontiers was broken. The entire community came together to strive for a massive goal, and they had done it. Onaku, SMB, Master Roxas, Program Fairy, Gordon, Orion, Taco, Konbu, Kabali, and countless other names who contributed to breaking Sonic Frontiers wide open. And of course, the one to put it all into practice, Katie 4. So what comes next? Katie could clearly lower the record even farther. The run had a start that was quite a bit behind her old PB, but for now, Katie seems to be taking a bit of a break. Now, she's trying to improve her time in Sonic Adventure DX. SilentMotorBoat is currently taking a break from Frontiers as well, to grind the 21-minute barrier in Sonic Adventure 2. While the others are burnt out after the long grinds, Onaku is still on the grind for sub-hour, getting closer and closer every day. I don't know exactly what'll happen in the futures of Sonic Frontiers any percent, but if the first few months of developments have taught me anything, we're barely scraping the surface. I'm DawnSR, and this is Speedrun Evolution. Thanks for watching.